Hi, I'm Cherie Burton, and this is the Soul Rose Show, where ancient feminine wisdom meets the modern path of soul evolution. I'm so grateful for those of you who are tuning in as faithful listeners, and welcome to new listeners. The collective sort of carries this God wound because of some outmoded dogma, the rejection of communion with nature as a way to connect to the divine, and how this really powerful, beautiful feminine force can help us kind of shed some of this old wounding and reclaim our place in the web of life and our place in our own bodies and in our own life domains. My guest is Mare Cromwell. She's the founder and director of the Great Mother Love Way nonprofit. She is internationally known Gaia mystic, high priestess, visionary healer, award-winning author, and her commitment is in birthing our new earth. She has studied with Native American elders for 26 years and has a few channeled books about Earth Mother, the Great Mother Bible. Also, to let you know, on May 13th, Mare is going to be coming into our Soul Rose community on Facebook to do a high vibe live Mother Gaia meditation. So this is a group meditation that will be hosted within our Soul Rose community. So if you have not asked to join that community, please do. You'll also get a free whole body healing kit for asking to join our community. So let's bring in Mare Cromwell as we discuss how we can heal the patriarchal wound with Mother Gaia. Mare, thank you so much for being on the Soul Rose Show. And thank you to our mutual friend, Melissa, for connecting us.
Well, I'm really honored to be here. I think this is going to be a very fun conversation, Cherie.
Yeah.
And I am saying your name right?
Cherie. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. When you and I talked however many couple weeks ago, I had taken some notes and then you sent me your books and I've had some time to do some reflection on our conversation, we actually went really deep, really fast, which I appreciated.
Yeah, we did. We just leaped right into it.
We totally did. And so I have these great notes, but also when I got your books after the fact, I was like, ooh, there's even better stuff for us to explore. But today we're going to just dial in on who and what Mother Gaia is. And we'll start there. But then I also want to move us into this discussion around what is happening to the Earth's resources, the kind of the vision for the future. And then also some wounding around God, that if Mother could talk about the God wound, what would she say? And we're going to have some discussions around religion as well. But let's start with a little of your story, just the condensed, like how this path found you, how Mother found you. And I'm always intrigued by women who just say yes to Divine Mother. And I'm curious, well, I do know your story, but I'm thinking our listeners would be super curious, like, why is she channeling Gaia Mother and what is Mother Gaia? And yeah, lead us into that.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to share a little bit about Mother Gaia. I call her Mother Gaia. A lot of people call her Earth Mother, Mother Earth. She has different names in all sorts of different cultures. All indigenous peoples work with her, honor her, revere her. They never lost their connection with her. So she goes by Pachamama in the Andes. There are many, many names for her. And she is our planetary caretaker. She is a very, very powerful spiritual being. And a lot of people who are raised in the Abrahamic traditions know of, for instance, the archangels. And the analogy I draw is that think of the archangels and who they are as very powerful spiritual beings, and know that Mother Gaia is another type of spiritual being. And from what I understand, this is may get there out there for people, is there are planetary caretakers for every planet in the universe. There are specific types of spiritual beings who take on this role. And having said that, Earth is a very unique planet. We are a planet of tremendous biodiversity, tremendous beauty. We also are a planet that from the very get-go, the creation of the planet, there's a spiritual blueprint that was put into place for Earth to be a planet of very high spiritual consciousness. And all this evolution that has been taking place since the very first cell evolved in the water has been coordinated under a divine plan, a master plan to raise up the spiritual energies here on the planet, with humans being part of this. And you're welcome to ask me any questions there if you want for me to elaborate about our planetary caretaker before I get into how it is that I have surrendered.
Yeah, I love it. It's reminding me of like Guardians of the Galaxy. Sorry to be so light about it, but I have heard in many spiritual circles and by different consciousness teachers that, yes, I mean, humanity is, I don't want to say like a grand universal experiment, but it's also just this testing ground for how consciousness can expand and evolve under certain conditions. Earth being, I guess, a little more treacherous than I mean, it holds this polarity as opposed to many other planets. And that's why there's such a vested interest from, let's just say, caretakers of other planets or other, life forms, you could say, have this vested interest in what's happening on Earth because of its, like you're saying, the biodiversity and the complexity.
Mhm. Oh, that's a really good question. It's complicated. My understanding, what you're talking about, it's very complicated. First of all, there are many, many conscious beings here on Earth. And the fact of the matter is actually is that the trees are very, very conscious. The flowers, I love working with the nature spirit realms. They very much exist in the multidimensional planes around us. They're incredibly conscious and very highly evolved. So we have within our Western mindset, and this is where I use the term cultural conditioning, have been given this story that humans are at the apex of all life here on Earth. And that's never been the truth. This perception has not served us, and it's not serving the planet and all the other beings here on the planet by any means.
Mhm. I have you heard of the Luminaries, like the book The Luminary? It's a book that somebody channeled or wrote that I read many, many years ago. I want to say I read it 15 years ago about guardians over the different crystals and rocks and the elementals and you know what I mean? Like guardians of the air and the fire and the water. And is that in conjunction with Mother Gaia? And is she sort of the main overseer of all of those realms?
Oh, uh,
Sorry, I'm asking
gosh,
really
no,
complex
I love your questions.
questions.
I love your questions. There are spiritual councils on many, many levels in many domains here on Earth. There are spiritual councils off planet. And the elementals that you're talking about, the luminaries is an interesting term. I didn't read that book. And if I understood what you're asking, there is, for instance, within the water realms, there's a king and the queen elemental over the water realms. And they're not hierarchical the way we think of hierarchical, and yet they still are the overarching beings that within their realms, there are many, many other water nature spirits. It's vast intelligence within the water. And the same goes for the air, the same goes for fire. There's a, mother of fire, father of fire. And then there's, mother of earth, but that's not earth mother. That's a different elemental sort of king and queen. And here's an interesting side fact that's very important actually to consider at this time is that a lot of the extreme weather that's happening these days is not just because of climate change due to rising CO2 levels. It's because these elementals, who are very powerful spiritual beings, are whipping up the energies within these storms to clear the denser energies.
Hmm.
They're constantly coming in because we humans are really good at getting caught up in our drama trauma, which is something we're going to touch on more, I know, in this interview, of why are we so caught up in our drama trauma? Why are we so caught up in our fear and anxiety and sense of lack? And these energies get mired in the multidimensional planes here on Earth. And so these really big storms are clearing the energies.
Mm.
And it's all making way for the rising of the energies on the planet, supporting that so that we can make the shift that we're in the midst of to a new Earth, to a new, what people call the ascension.
Yeah, that narrative flies in the face of a punitive God who's destroying the earth because we're so evil and
Oh
controlling
gosh.
the elements and the seas. You know what I'm saying? I was actually
Yeah.
taught in my religion of origin that Satan has control of all waters of the earth.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
When I
That
was
is
there,
so
I know,
bizarre
like
to
when
me.
I was serving a mission for the LDS church when I was in my early 20s, and we were not allowed to go near water for that reason. So
Oh, that makes me so sad
I
because
know,
water
right?
is
And
so
water's so
sacred.
nurturing and yeah, yeah. And if mother, there was no talk of mother, just being clear here, right?
Yeah.
No talk of mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, just to sort of, I know we're trying to give language to these powers and forces and roles that these powerful beings play. And so I know it's hard to put into language, but just further clarifying about Mother Gaia. So her own sovereign spiritual being. Because I
Yes.
think of Mother Gaia, and I think a lot of other people think of Earth, Mother Earth, this way is that how can a planet have its own spirit or be its own being? And I'm trying to, in my mind, marry those two ideas
Mm.
conceptually, right? Like, is she a form of a personage? You know what I'm saying? Or, I mean, she is feminine, obviously.
She is feminine. She does embody the divine feminine. Gosh, I'm trying to figure out how to answer your question because to me, it just is like, well, she is, you know?
Right, right, right. But for those of us who have this conditioning around literality, when you talk about a
Uh-huh.
being, it goes straight to a human formed consciousness spirit form, a human and spirit form.
Yeah. Well, this is why I draw the analogy of if you think about the archangels, most of them have never been in the physical here on earth. A few have. Don't ask me to go into specifics there. For instance, Enoch is in the First Testament, the first book of the Bible. And he's a very powerful spiritual being who chose to take on a human body for a couple of incarnations. But for the most part, he is a spiritual being who exists in the spiritual planes within the universal realms and supports Earth. So Mother Gaia is a spiritual being who is not human. She never was human. She comes from a specific group of spiritual beings who have the role of being planetary caretakers. And she carries a lot of energy. I can feel her coming in a lot of times. And I haven't even told the story about how it is that I surrendered to serve her. We'll get there
Yeah,
in a
I know.
moment.
I know, because I'm like trying to pick your brain on.
Well, I hope I'm making sense with what I'm sharing.
It does make sense to me, totally does. It wouldn't like, I would have kept drilling you on it before just to kind of be because in my old belief system, and I think our brains have to do this for us to make sense of the world,
Yeah.
and it's like, what form is she in? Like, I would have had to know, like, because of the way that I was conditioned, like, how could this being
Mhm.
be real if they don't have, even in spirit form, a human personage, right? It's just hard for
Yeah.
us to connect to beings, like you're saying, the Sasquatch and other things, like, at least I know that form, the art and the pictures and whatnot. But for what we're talking about, for people to connect to Mother Gaia, it's hard to
Mhm.
connect if we don't have a semblance in our mind of what form she is in.
No, I hear you. And it's interesting to me because Mother Gaia and the Virgin Mary are very, very close. They work together very closely. And yet it's very easy to find a statue or an image of the Virgin Mary. I mean, I actually wear a miraculous medal around my neck that represents
Mm.
the Virgin Mary, but I also wear a turtle, and the turtle represents Mother Gaia in a number of different native traditions here in North America for Turtle Island.
Mm.
So we use symbols. Native peoples use symbols for her. Some people draw her as a human looking body. And there was a parquet ad. I don't know if you remember this many, many years ago. I kind of
The
dating
butter
myself here
thing?
of yes, it's like it's not nice to fool Mother Nature, you know, and they
Yeah.
give her a parquet and tell her it's butter and she tastes it and she likes it and then she's told it's margarine. And in
Mm.
there, they have her as an actress wearing a poofy blouse and a frumpy skirt. And it's really important for us to do what we can to expand our minds, expand our imaginations, because even outside of Mother Gaia herself, we are surrounded by all these spiritual beings who support the vitality, all life on the planet. And there are people that I know personally who can see nature spirits. So
It's
I would say that's similar, although Mother Gaia is much, much bigger.
yeah. In my mind, I just see like I'm just gonna show this to everyone who's watching on YouTube. But I have this beautiful, like, I have 7 archetypes on my wall in cards, like images from different card decks I have. This one is Sophia, which is mother of all, mother of the universe, Mother Sophia. She's different than Gaia, but I need it.
Mhm.
And she's in a rose in the universe in this card. This is a Rebecca Campbell deck from the rose deck.
Mm. Oh,
And for
beautiful.
me, I just have to see the symbol like you're talking about. I have to look at it so that I feel that connection visually to who I'm communicating with. And,
Well,
and
you
this is
know,
just one artist's
it
rendition, but for me, it resonates because it's
yeah.
a rose and that's my symbol. in my archetypal, subconscious, that's the symbol that resonates for me.
Well, you have one of my books next to you there,
Yes,
right?
I
The Great
do.
Mother
I
Bible.
do.
Will you show
Yeah,
that?
great image.
Because that image is what Mother Gaia, when I was working on that book with her, because that's a series of conversations with her, and people can't see it right now because I'm talking unless you have, I don't know how you
No,
have
I
your
have it.
screen
It's a
set up,
gallery
but
view. Yeah, they can see it.
oh,
Yeah.
great, perfect. So she wanted that image. She wanted the wrinkles in her face.
Mm,
She wanted to be seen as just embodying so much love toward all life here on earth
mm.
and toward this glowing orb, which is the new earth coming in. So if that helps you to look at that
It's
image and
like
say,
she's my
there's Mother
grandma.
Gaia.
Yeah, like it really, yes, yes. And it's so funny
Beautiful.
because I think even in the email, I'm like, I just read your grandmother book.
I
You're like,
know. And I'm like,
oh,
I don't know what
grandma.
book she's talking
That's
about
not what it's
there.
called.
Yeah.
But that was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So,
perfect.
yeah, that makes sense because I study depth psychology, Jungian and archetypal, how our subconscious speaks to us through symbols. Exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
We
Yes.
see it, you even say the word archangel and immediately I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay. I get what they mean to me in my brain, in my mind, what I see, which is not
Hmm.
wings and a sword. It's different." But
Hmm.
I think we get too caught up. And then the reason I'm drilling you on this is because I know that my past self, like I said, in my old belief system would have needed form, like to know the mystery of it, to understand it before I could
Yeah.
believe it was real, right? And so now just using these archetypes and these symbols, it can be enough for me now, right? But before I was just like, oh my gosh, this feels like cosmic soup stuff. This feels like nothing I can hold on to and attach to. Feels so ethereal.
And I hear what you're saying, and I can understand what you're saying because I probably was there many years ago with my Catholic upbringing. But
And we're
now I
gonna go
have
there. We
learned
are gonna go there.
we're, we're going to go there. But now I've come to a place where if I feel an energy coming in, I can discern this is another spiritual being coming in. I don't need to see it. Some people can. I work with people who can, but I can feel it. I can discern. And usually gets to the point when if I'm talking about a spiritual being, they come in anyway, because multidimensionally they know they're being mentioned.
I think that there's just a lot of fear around connecting to something other than a Father God somewhere in the heavens. So we'll get to that, the fear around that.
Mm,
But I want you to take us through because I know you had a really pronounced health crisis that led you
mhm.
into this path that you're on now. And usually there's this rite of passage that every healer, way shower, teacher goes through to put them kind of like in the work they're doing and on the map of consciousness that they're meant to be on. So, yeah, why don't you share with our listeners
Yes.
that evolution for you?
Well, I had already apprenticed with a Cherokee medicine woman for 14 years, and then she and I parted ways. And the following year, I befriended an Algonquin medicine man shortly after the teacher and I disconnected. And we really hit it off. And there were all sorts of miracles happening just when we met. I went to one of his workshops. And about a year later, he contacted me because he lived in a different state from where I was. And he said, Gaia, he calls her Gaia, and he'd been working closely with Gaia for many, many years. And she actually appeared to him one time as a column of wispy vapor on a trail. He was hiking by himself and she appeared and identified herself as Gaia. And they had a really long conversation, like 3 hours. And she proceeded to tell him certain things that were going to happen in his life right after they met. And he was like, oh, no, that's impossible. I can't, that won't happen. And they all happened. And so his rapport with her was very close. So she contacted him, or they were in communication. He was doing ceremony. She requested that he and I do a ceremony together for her a month later. And he
Hmm.
contacted me and I said, oh, yes, of course I will do that. I'd love to do that. And I hadn't been feeling well for a number of months. And later on that month, this was May of 2012, later on that month, at the end of May, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes. And this was 4 days before I was scheduled to do the ceremony with this Algonquin medicine man. I knew I was going to do the ceremony. Nothing was going to stop me, even though I was freaking out about this diagnosis and afraid of what the doctors were going to ask me to do and take and chemo and et cetera, et cetera. And so I drove up to the northern part of Pennsylvania, kind of met halfway because he's in the Hudson River Valley. And I was in Maryland at the time. And we did a ceremony in a forest there, a huge state forest. He said to me just prior to starting the ceremony, he knew what my situation was. He knew I had the cancer diagnosis and all that. And he said, I'm going to be bringing Gaia's energy and conscious into your energy body, but I don't know how you're going to disconnect afterwards. And my response to him in the moment was, I'm not worried because I know whatever's meant to happen is going to happen. And I know my life is to serve mother already because I'd been an environmentalist and then studied with a Cherokee teacher. And so I'd already been developing a really strong sense of Earth Mother, Mother Gaia. But this took it to another level because right at the end of the ceremony, she started talking to me very clearly, like hearing me right now. And she said that if I surrendered to her to the extent she would ask me to surrender, that she would help me heal from the cancer without the doctors. And of course, in that moment, I'm like, yes, of course, big fat yes. So I kind of joke about it, like she got me, she got me. I mean, if it had been a year before, I would have been like, well, I don't really know. This sounds like really big and scary, but in that situation, I was terrified. And she's like, I'm here to help you. But the deal is that you surrendered to me to follow through on what she was going to ask me to do. And so that's what's played out since that early June of 2012. And there's so many miracles that have happened, like within, a week and a half after that. I was spiritually called by the dolphins and whales, and I knew it was Mother working through them to go to the ocean and do ceremony. And I love doing ceremony. I learned a lot about doing it when I was with the Cherokee teacher. And on the way to the beach, 3-hour drive, I filled my little car up with, I had a little TDI diesel Golf VW. I filled it up to full. And then I went tootling down the highway to get to my destination on the coast. And the gas tank stayed on full for 110 miles.
Wow.
And I was kind of freaking out going, oh my God, it's broken. It's broken. And I'm living off my savings right now. And I was working on a whole other book. And then it started going down normally after 110 miles. And that's when I turned to Mother because she and I were talking, but she was silent as I was freaking out. I think she was probably humored by my freak out. And I turned to her, I said, you must be doing this. She said, this is so you know to trust me. I'm taking care of you. Trust me. And I've had so many miracles beyond that, but that was a pretty interesting one. And then when I got to the beach, I was there for, I guess, 3 nights. I was up in the middle of the night doing ceremony. I was on the beach doing ceremony. I was in my car doing ceremony because I kicked off the beach at 10 p.m. because that's what they do on Assateague in Virginia. And essentially, Mother said, she came through so strongly. She was talking with me the whole time. She said, I want you to put this other book aside that you're working on. This is what I want you to write. This is the title, and these are all the chapter headings. And then she gave me the very first chapter, which is her message to us women.
And which book is that? The first?
That's the first one. That's the Messages from Mother Earth, Mother book.
Yeah, I'm just gonna hold it up. Yeah, I
So
have
that was written in 5 weeks, the summer of 2012.
I like the format that you wrote these in. It's so relatable because you have kind of this fictional character named Sarah who's having this conversation with Mother Earth, which is very much paralleling your own. Putting it in the second person like that, I really liked.
Well, Cherie, it's the only way I could have done it because it was freaking me out that I am talking with Mother and I'm writing a book with her. It was freaking me out. And so Mother's like, well, we'll just come up with a character and her name is Sarah. And then I found out afterwards that Sarah is in the Bible. She's the first woman who's talked about in
Sarah,
the Old Testament. Yeah. And I went, oh my gosh. There was no coincidence with that. But Mother said,
married to Abraham,
Sarah.
No less, when we're talking about the Abrahamic religions.
There we go. Oh gosh, I'm getting energy on that. Interesting.
She's probably one of the most misunderstood figures in the Old Testament, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm certain that's true. And I know there are a lot of misunderstood ones, especially all the women. Yeah.
Their history.
That's part of the conversation.
Yeah. They were rewritten from a patriarchal lens to fit the narrative of the Roman Catholic Church, their agenda.
Yeah. Many, many rewrites and edits. And
I'm just picturing you in your car, in your little Volkswagen, going to the beach and having this conversation with Mother. And I'm like, that is so cool because there was a properness, a propriety about connecting to the divine in a certain setting with a certain contextually. We weren't taught that Mother could meet us where we're at. There was no place for that in the paradigms that we all grew up in. Hey, just a little break in the discussion to remind you about what I alluded to in the intro, which is that Mare will be coming in to do a live Gaia group meditation in our Soul Rose Facebook communities on Monday, May 13th, the day after Mother's Day at 11 a.m. Mountain Time for just about 45 minutes. Ask to join our private Facebook group, Soul Rose Community, to be in the know about this powerful time. And as a Mother's Day gift to yourself, even if it's a day after the fact, consider coming in and connecting with Earth and these powerful feminine forces with Mare as our facilitator.
I mean, honestly, one of the best ways I work with her, one of the best places is in the bathtub. I've had profound spiritual experiences in the bathtub. 'Cause I do water ceremony. I bless the water. I call in the spirit teams to bless I pour sacred water in the bathtub,
But
and
don't you
it's a
know Satan
ritual.
has control of the waters? Weren't you ever told that? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh gosh, that's so sad. That's
Yeah,
so sad. No, he doesn't. Let's
I
just
know.
put that out there, is he
Yeah,
does not. It's not happening. Never did.
I know. If anyone could see my eye roll right now, it's like,
Well, and I'm thinking of the whales and the dolphins because I work with them spiritually, and, they're like, "That is so ridiculous."
absolutely ludicrous. Okay, so
Yeah.
you do these ceremonies and I'm a huge like I think that the kind of the wave of the future will be women sitting in these sacred circles and men too and doing these ceremonies that I guess you could say have been labeled paganistic from a very ignorant lens. Paganism
Mhm.
is, well, you probably know the history, is that their worship, quote unquote, worship of earth was paganism. And the churches hated any kind of nature connection or any kind of these elementals or anything working with that they deemed heretical. That's why there isn't this nature connection, this very natural connection. It's been like, no, you have to do it this way to get to the real source.
Yeah, and do you know the word pagan actually means from the land? All of our
Yeah.
ancestors were pagan, so to speak. To me, it's a
It's just
I don't
indigenous.
use it. Yeah, it just means indigenous, you
Mhm.
know? My sense is that patriarchal religions, it was all about control. It was all about making sure that people were complying with what the state wanted them to do. And the state took over the church. And it was never at all what Christ was about when Christ was born and taught and did all the miracles that he did in Israel when he was alive. Christ actually revered the divine feminine. Mary Magdalene and the Christed one were very, very close.
Yeah.
And yet all of his teachings, almost all of his teachings, have gotten really warped and taken over by powers that be that want to control.
Mm.
And I think that these powers that be, they were afraid. They were afraid of the powers of these healers, these medicine people, these shamans. And yet the irony is, and I spent a winter actually researching the historical Jesus because my very first book, which I didn't send to you, which I should have sent to you, called If I Gave You God's Phone Number. That book took me 7 years to write. And that was before Mother Gaia came in so strongly into my life.
Mm.
But that book is based on the question, if I gave you God's phone number, what would you do with it? So I interviewed Christians and Jews and agnostics and a
Mm.
Cherokee medicine woman I was with, an Afghani Sufi, people who were spiritual but not religious. It was very, very broad, very, very open-minded look at the question of God and what do people think about who God is and what would they want to talk to God about if they believed in a God. Fundamentalists would come up to me because I promoted the book all over the country. I was at the front of Borders and Barnes and Noble and doing book talks and, very open-minded churches, Unitarian churches. But in the bookstores, the fundamentalist Christians would come up and they were so offended by my book once they started to get a sense of what it was about and just started raging at me.
Mm.
That was kind of the
Mm.
exception, but it happened enough that I spent a winter. At the time, I had a gardening business, so I'd work in the growing season, promote the book, on the side, and then I would spend the winter to write or read. And so there's a well-known historian out of a university. I think he's probably retired now, and I can't place his name, but he's written a number of books. One of them is called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. He
Mm.
talks about how Christ was a shaman.
Yeah, I
And
heard
at
about
that time, yeah, in that time in that part of the world, all over the world, actually, every village had a shaman. And they were performing what would be called miracles, but they were doing shamanic work. And when I
Mm.
read that, I went, bingo. You
Same
know?
with, I've read like Wisdom Jesus by different, yogi masters and even the Buddhist, Christ Buddhists, and like how Christ was literally going all over the world to gather these wisdom teachings and meeting with indigenous
Mm,
people and just
yes,
learning the ways of the
yes,
spirit in all its forms. And that
yes,
Mary Magdalene, when the 7 devils that he cast out of her was actually clearing her, he was doing a wisdom, sort of like you're saying, sort of a shamanistic wisdom type of clearing for her, as opposed to her just being so evil that she had possessed by 7 demons, right? Deeper teaching of that is that she was at his feet learning these traditions and that she had this desire to be attuned in that way. You could call it a Kundalini awakening, call it many things, but that, yeah, he
mhm,
was facilitating that for her. And if you look at some of the Gnostic
mm,
texts, they're very reflective of this wisdom Jesus, as you say. But
mhm,
when we say shaman, we have a certain visual of that in our head, like a native, let's just say a native elder in a headdress or something dancing around a fire. Some people have that visual of that's the
yeah.
shaman.
But they don't need to look like that.
No.
I mean, honestly, some of the work I do is shamanistic. I don't dance well, I do sacred fire ceremony, it's true, but I
Yeah.
don't I don't think I embody the image you were just describing.
No, but
But I
I have
wanna share
met
that.
so many people who are connected to the Christ
Yeah,
and Christ consciousness who do this kind of work. And like you
yeah,
were saying, there's vitriol coming from these fundamentalist camps, which is the antithesis of love, by the way. It's instant judgment, it's fear. It's not the way
exactly.
of Christ. It's not inclusive. It's very fear based. And having come from a background very similar to that, I will tell you that they think they are doing the right thing by calling you out. They feel it is that Christ has sent them on a mission to call you out because you're practicing heresy and you're not connected to the one divine creator, which is a man.
Yes.
And not to diminish that, I'm just saying, like, I do have a respect for people who are in that camp because they are fully convinced they are doing the right thing, that they're very blind to that they're operating in a fear-based reality. So they're projecting that fear.
Yeah, what you're touching on is how powerful dogma can be,
Absolutely.
and how people can be convinced that they are doing the right thing, even if it is not coming from a place of love. It is certainly not coming from a place of oneness, and there's no compassion that's within their actions and their thoughts. It's very tragic, and it's been playing out for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it has played out in how it's interesting because the roots of it in some ways, well, I don't know if I can go there. I was going to say the roots of it lie in, when somebody's really different than us, we're concerned, we're afraid, we feel a little
Yeah,
threatened. There are sociological studies on that when, people living in tribal villages and a stranger would appear on the edge of the village, there was always kind of little concern. Is this safe? Is it not safe?
right,
But it's gotten, and this is where, if anything is coming from a place of fear, it's not coming from the truest essence of spirituality that's for the highest good.
right.
It's not.
We're taught to be a God-fearing people, and people conflate that word God-fearing with, like, trembling for God and bowing, and I'm so nothing next to you, and, like, they've taken that mentality into their interactions with others, and they feel like they are the God status because they have all the answers, and they're holding all this truth, and that those who are opposed to the truth they hold should fear and tremble also. I didn't put this is part of my deconstruction process from a very high demand
Yeah,
ideology that I was raised
yeah,
with.
yeah.
It's a very militant type of way of going about things. Again, I just send
It's
compassion to
also,
that, but I also want to call it out because it really does hurt a lot of people. It's hurting us more than it's helping us advance spirituality on the earth.
yes. I mean, that was one of the things that came forward to me again and again was the arrogance of these fundamentalists who were so offended by my book and making me wrong, making what
Mhm.
was in the book wrong, making other people's belief systems wrong.
Yeah, it's a
And
smugness, it's an arrogance, and Christ had strong words about that with the religious leaders of his time.
yeah, but it's funny because I'm hearing Mother talking to me right now, and Mother loves all of her children.
Yeah.
What she also has a broader picture of that very few of us have is how it is that my Cherokee teacher called it, the angry God religions, which is how it's written into the Great Mother Bible too.
Mm.
The angry God religions, because the creator was never, has never, will never be an angry being. It's just
He's
not.
not mad at us.
That's how,
Like, God's mad at
yeah,
you was kind of this thing that got ingrained in me when I did something wrong. God's mad at you, or you disappointed Jesus, or you made Jesus sad, or Heavenly Father's, you
yeah.
got to repent.
And
And
then
it's a
you
never
get caught
ending.
up in the guilt and the shame, and you're never good enough, and you're always in trouble, especially if you're a woman, because you're dirty, because you have moon cycles. It just
It's
goes
so
on and on and
much.
on to diminish us. Like, I have a friend who just put a book out about how we are all divine sparks. We're
Mm.
divine sparks.
Yeah.
Every single one of us, we all embody the creation within us. We embody mother within us.
Mm.
And if we only knew that, to me, the truth, and I'm always leery if someone says the truth, this is the truth, but I'm just going to
Capital
word it
T.
this way.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
me, yeah, to me, the truth is that we are so loved. We are so incredibly loved by all of these spiritual beings. Mother Gaia loves us hugely. Sophia loves us hugely. I call her the creatrix, the great divine feminine of the
Mm.
universe. The creator loves us hugely. Our ancestors love us hugely. It goes on
Yeah.
and on. The archangels love us beyond, it's all beyond words.
Yeah. I feel like the greatest lie that we've been sold is that we are separate from all of that love, that we have to earn it through our worthiness.
That's where I just encourage people to open the door.
Mm.
Open the door and walk through and know that the love is there.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that would be my response to the fundamentalist camp as well. Just reflecting back to them, love, right? This is just
Mhm.
so interesting that you feel so strongly about this. You must care so much about humanity, and I can relate to that because I care so much too. In fact, my heart is so full of love. So full of love for our
Mm.
planet, for humanity, for God, and just handing that back to them for them to I feel like that's what Jesus would do. He always taught in parables. What we have, the writings in the New
Yeah.
Testament, he never gave direct answers. He let people stew in the mystery and the paradox of everything that he was doing. Like you were saying, all these miracles. Yeah, he tapped into the power of the earth, the power of the elements. And I think we want to put him in like a suit and tie in some respects and polish him up and make him and brand him. So I have really strong feelings about that. You have a whole chapter in your book, chapter 11 in the Great Mother Bible on the God wound. And you were raised Catholic. It's called On the Catholic
Mhm.
Church and God Woundedness.
Yeah. When I was promoting that first book, If I Gave You God's Phone Number, I really did not have a strong sense initially of how many people grew up in these dogmatic angry God religions, that Judaism, Christianity. I didn't run into that many Muslim people, but they're a lesser percentage of our population. I did interview a Sufi man in the book, but anyway. And then when I started doing talks at Unitarian churches and I would say the word God, there was like a trigger reaction. Like, people were
It's a
repulsed if I
huge
even
trigger
used,
for, yeah, it can be a
yeah.
huge trigger for people. Yeah.
Oh, it's tremendous, and it's very unfortunate, and unfortunate is not even the right word, that's putting it too mildly, and that was when I realized that there is a very, I don't know what percentage of our population, but there are a lot of people who are God wounded, and it's not that God wounded them, it's that the dogmatic religions in which they grew up taught them a form of God, which is what we've just been talking about, that is very fear-based,
Mm.
controlling. You're never good enough. It's kind of like Santa Claus, and you're going to get a sack of coals if you're
Yeah.
judged by Santa Claus to have been
Yeah.
not the greatest child.
And they're
But
and you're
but
being
it's very similar.
micromanaged and always being watched to see if you're naughty or nice. Santa
Yeah.
is an archetype of God in our culture,
Yes.
actually. Yeah.
And yet, when I walked away from the Catholic Church, because it was really not fulfilling me, and I was in my early 20s, much as to my parents' chagrin, and I ended up actually spending 7 years at a yoga center where there was a guru doing a lot of teaching and teaching different types of, one major form of yoga, Kripalu Yoga Center. And this guru talked about a creator being, I forget even the word that he used, which was not at all angry, was compassionate and loving. And I'm like, this makes so much more sense to me. I will embrace this model, so to speak, because the cultural conditioning of the Catholic faith is very strong. And I'm still dealing with levels of shame and guilt, and not feeling good enough. It still rises up in me now, and
Sure.
I'm in my early 60s now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an ongoing process of healing.
I think even like you said, we're swimming in it by osmosis. I can literally tell you every single person that I have interviewed on this podcast has some kind of a God wound or a religious wound, even if they're completely still faithful in their religion or whatever, or if they've left or whatever, or if they never went to church at all. It's
Mm.
America was founded on these God-fearing colonizer manifest destiny, sort of this hierarchical way of from the monarchy from all the way back in England, right? So America has
Well,
carried
from the
that and
Vatican too,
yeah.
but it came from Europe. I mean, these wounded people came from Europe, and, the Cherokee teacher that I was with talked about how there were prophecies that there were gonna be people coming in these great big winged boats, and these people needed healing. They
Mm,
knew already that
mm,
these colonists who were gonna come were very wounded. Unfortunately, the opportunities did not arise for them to offer the healings that could have happened
mm.
because indigenous peoples don't have an angry God cosmology.
So
In
interesting.
their yeah, in their realms, the world in which they live is very, very abundant. Everyone takes care of each other. They know how to work with the forest. They know how to work with the animals. They are doing dreaming journeys to communicate with the overarching devas of the deer, for instance, that they want to hunt. And it's all in this place of reverence and love and honoring the web of life.
Mm.
It's so much healthier.
I want to read an excerpt from this chapter, but I also want to speak to something that came to my mind as you were talking. Mormonism is my religion of origin. I think I shared with you I'm a seventh generation on my direct matrilineal line, my mother's mother's, all the way back to the beginning of the church. And Mormons are big on genealogy. So I've done a lot of, my mother and her mother and her, they've just done so much genealogy. Well, I am actually related to a Cherokee princess on my mother's line as well. Her father was Chief Open Gate, and I want to find out more about her. So, listeners, if you know anything, let me know. But it occurred to me that I also just have that little dip into that indigenous on that same line. And, she actually married one of my great something grandfathers who was member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So,
Mhm.
I'm fascinated by how these connections happen in our lines and that we are the embodiment that like, I can say, "Oh, yes, I have this Mormon heritage, but what about this other? And what about that? And what about my European ancestry?" And that's why I followed I think I shared with you the Celtic rose lineage in Ireland and Scotland, which is also a big part of what I hail from genealogically. So I think knowing that we're all connected doesn't matter if you do your pedigree charts and all of your genealogy and know all of your ancestry, we're all still connected. We're all still in this, like you call it, the web of love or the web of life by birthright. We're all connected to each other.
Yeah, and we're connected with the trees. We're connected with the water.
Mm,
We're connected to the animals.
mm.
We could not live if it weren't for what is provided for us by all of these. I call them the sacred seen and unseen ones.
I want to read these two paragraphs while we were talking about the God wound.
Okay.
This is part of what you wrote here from Mother. There are many women and men who won't or can't leave their more patriarchal religions, and I do love them. I love them just as much as I love my two legates who have left their religion of birth to find spiritual community in more open, all embracing churches or other groups. Many have turned to Buddhism, yoga, or meditation groups or other alternatives. So many of my human children are God wounded. It's so sad, and it's not because the great mystery wounded them. It certainly wasn't I that wounded them either, because they were not learning much about me in their churches or synagogues or mosques. It's the version of God they learned while they were young and how God was described to them that wounded their hearts and their spirit. They were taught to fear God. God would punish them. Yet, this is so far from the truth. But again, these have been teachings influenced by those who are leaving me now. And you just go on, it's such a relief to see their energies departing. It's time to heal these ways of perceiving the great mystery, since the Creator has never been about fear, only
Mm,
about the divine love. And what
mhm,
I guess occurs to me too is that I was taught that this life is a test of faith and that I needed to hold a certain amount of fear to stay grounded in keeping myself in check, being warned about people like you, Mare. People like
Scary
me
as I
now.
am.
My mother warned me. But no, it was just this like, if you don't hold a certain amount of, and some people have even conflated that fear with respect or reverence.
Oh.
And I think I shared with you that like my favorite part of growing up in the church was girls' camp, going out in nature and connecting out. Those were my most spiritual experiences, or with music. It wasn't sitting reverently with my dress and my legs crossed and my arms folded and my head bowed. And there's a beautiful divine place for that. I'm not mocking it, but the lights were fluorescent. It was stiff.
Mhm.
There was a holding back. There was an air of not enoughness, and it was also mixed with this beauty of spirit. So it was hard to parse out, what was true and what wasn't for me until I got much older and realized that my health was being affected. I was told that people who put the earth over everything else are people who have this really dark agenda. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but you talk about
Oh,
we get just sanitizing. It's whitewashing nature and cycles and rhythms and reality and rawness as not spiritual. It's the domestication of our spirits, right?
I'm thinking of the way you're wording that, the domestication of our spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one way to word it. It's such a disconnection from a much more balanced, more harmonious, more divine feminine infused spirituality that is the basis for all life.
Yeah.
And you know that already. This is where I have arrived. I'll word it this way, is that I love the creator. I don't really know exactly who the creator is. I love the term the great mystery because to me, if we're incarnate in a physical body, we don't fully understand. It's only when we pass over and we're in the spirit realms that we start to understand the complexity, the intelligence, the tremendous love that is embodied in the creator. But I also believe in the creatrix, which is part of the great mystery, but and this is where it gets a little hard to define for me, and I'm still there in the great mystery end of things. But there is a powerful, powerful divine feminine force within the universe that has birthed
Mhm.
everything within the universe, including Mother Gaia, including this planet, including my soul and your soul, and beings who are living in
Mhm.
planets way in another galaxy.
Mhm.
And within all of this is this huge web of love.
Mm.
And I believe we are here incarnate to find our way back to the love, the divine love, to find our way back so that we can embody the divine love. And calling in the Christed one, the Christ conscious, is one way to do it. And Mother Gaia loves the Christed one. She's calling for all of us to open our hearts and energies to the Christed one, but not the dogmatic, angry God version of Christ, but who the Christ really was as a highly, highly evolved soul.
Who
But
embodied
even the
perfect love,
trees,
right?
yeah, but the trees embody the Christ consciousness. I mean, this is maybe out there for a lot of people, but we live in a planet that is so incredibly beautiful and complex. There's psychic hotlines between all the trees, the bushes, the flowers, the winds, the clouds. I mean, if we only knew like the communication channels that are beyond the human realms that are happening all the time,
Mhm.
and the spiritual councils that are at play or at work, depending on how you want to word it, that are coordinating what's happening on the planet to bring us to a planet of much higher love
Yeah.
and to wean us from the fear, to invite us forward to shed the fear.
Mm.
This is what's happening right now. And we're all invited to it. We're invited to this party. And frankly, the planet's going to go there regardless. The question is
Mm.
how many humans are going to wake up enough to evolve into that place,
I think
because we all
that
have free will.
yeah, yes. The fundamentalist fear that we spoke to of the dogma, people who have been, let's just say, indoctrinated with a lot of dogma and fear. And there is a great reticence for them to consider the path of oneness, even though if you really look at Christ's teachings, it was all the Father and I are one. He was teaching oneness, he was teaching that interconnectivity. And I remember you
Mm.
saying, in our last conversation that you had talked to some kind of an elder or wise teacher that talked to you about what he foresaw in the future of religions. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, he was a Shoshone elder, Shoshone medicine man, extraordinarily gifted, Benny LeBeau. And he mentioned to me one time, because I studied under him. He was my guardian, spiritual guardian when I was writing the Great Mother Bible. Yeah,
Mm,
I was under his wing. He said that in time, organized religion will not be making it through the transitions ahead in the future because the energetics of those religions just won't mesh. There's too much density, there's too much fear. And in order for us to evolve into this next sort of iteration of evolution, we have to shift out of the fear. We have to heal ourselves from the fear. And I dance with this every day. I mean, I have my
yeah.
own anxieties, I have my own fears. And then because of my spiritual practice, though, I'm able to start to tap into, rising up above it and healing it. Whatever is within me that's wounded enough that draws it in.
Yeah. I'm in the same dance.
Yeah.
And I think it's also
Yeah.
because we're just picking up on the collective, like no matter how much work we do within ourselves, we're still
Oh,
going to pick up
yes.
on the collective stuff. And as Christed beings, as Christ consciousness in connection to that, metaphorically, even want to say it, like we can move that through us and transmute it, but we don't always have the awareness. When we do the work for ourselves, we're doing the work for everyone, not as Christed,
Yeah.
but also like we don't always have the awareness because we're so programmed and so conditioned in this fear mind virus that we don't always
Mhm.
have the awareness that we're swirling in that. So,
Mhm.
so I see Mother Earth, Gaia, I see that as a way to ground and align us with that truth of who we actually are. If you were giving somebody, I know you're going to come into our Facebook community, Soul Rose community, and you're going to do this beautiful guided meditation to anchor in our connection to the root chakra and the heart of mother, which I'm really looking forward to
Mhm.
that the day after Mother's Day on May 13th.
Yes, perfect timing.
But what would you say practically when you say that you move through this every day, that you're sort of walking through that fear and that anxiety? Do you have any kind of an anchoring practice that you do that you might be able to share with us?
I do a number of things. One of the things that I do, honestly, is I visualize my energy body, my aura, as a bubble, maybe an egg-shaped bubble, and I visualize mirrors on the outside. And I put it out there on the spirit plane. My intention is to not take in anything that is coming in from outside of me. So, yes, we have a lot of drama, trauma, fear within the human matrix of energetics. And I'm such an empath, I absorb it in a millisecond.
Yeah, me too.
So that's one exercise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And
And
that's something
then
you teach to children too. That's a beautiful, simple
yes.
visual. Yeah.
Yes. I connect with mother and her heart every day. I actually energetically drop to her heart
Mm,
and invite her to fill me with her love. And I feel her coming into my womb space. I feel her coming into my heart chakra.
mm.
There are a lot of different things I do beyond that, but that is a big part of it.
We just started Women's Wisdom Circle, and that's one of the things that I'm having our participants do together is to anchor right into Mother Earth by dropping in all of our thoughts through into our heart and down into our womb space, out through the root chakra into Mother Earth for that connection.
Mhm.
And I think people can just get creative, right? Whatever
Yeah.
visual works for them, it extends beyond belief systems, what we're talking about. And I love the great mystery as a term for God as well, because it's so personal for each one of us who and what creator is, who and what Mother Earth is. And so I love that you've brought these where, and I'm just going to hold them up to so you can tell people where to find them. But the ones, what
Ah,
was the name of the first book? If I gave you God's phone number,
if
which
I gave you God's phone number. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And this
Well,
one is
they're
messages.
available.
Are
That's
they all on
Messages from Mother
Amazon, right?
Earth and Mother. They're all on Amazon. You can go to my website with greatmotherlove.earth and I can autograph one for you, but they're available as ebooks. You can order them from any bookstore. You can find them all over.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's brave, it's bold, it's heart-based, and it's a gift. And also thank you for your books and for your time. And I'm grateful that
Well,
we were
thank
able to go
you.
so deep. I feel like I peppered you with all these really deep,
Oh, no, they were
Um,
beautiful questions. It's wonderful. I like being poked and pushed and nudged to go deeper. And if we have a millisecond,
yes,
everyone
let's
who's
yeah.
listening is invited to participate in the Thousand Goddesses Gathering Global Grid.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, this is based on a Tibetan prophecy that when 1,000 goddesses or Tibetan Taras unite, this will shift the tone of our sacred earth from fear to compassion. This is exactly what we've been talking about. And so
Mm,
these are ceremonies all over the world. They can be simple ceremonies or larger ceremonies, women gathering in circle, men joining them to support them, to call in the divine feminine, to call in these powerful, beautiful spiritual ones who want to help us. And it's all
mm,
about healing the planet, healing the denser realms of fear and
mm.
anxiety, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank
So it's
you.
happening every fall. And I know
This
you'll probably
November,
put the
right?
website
November
there.
1st?
November 1st, yeah, which
So
will
we'll put
be
the
a
link
new
to that in
moon.
the show notes.
That'd be great.
It's just the
Yeah.
number 1000goddesses.net, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mare. This was really, really enlightening.
I loved speaking with you. Thank you for having me. It's been very rich.
Hey, it's Cherie here. Have you gotten my free whole body healing kit mini course? All you have to do is ask to join our private Facebook group, Soul Rose Community, and we'll send it right to your inbox. And I want you to know that I am so grateful for every single one of you who listens to these episodes. You can follow me on Instagram at Cherie.Burton to deepen into the discussion that you heard today. And I would be ever so grateful if you would leave this podcast a positive review on Apple Podcasts. This allows many more people to find these kinds of healing and empowerment gems that we bring forward in our discussions. And if you want to see our faces, check out my Soul Rose Show YouTube channel. Have a glorious week, and we'll talk to you next time on the Soul Rose Show.